So I made a comment on Twitter that got some attention last weekend that I'd turned over just short of £500,000 on Champions Day. And first of all, I'd like to admit that I actually got that wrong. But I'd also like to tell you how you can turn over £1 million quite easily when you're trading on sports. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. So yeah, first of all, an admission here. I didn't trade just under £500,000 on Saturday. It was actually over £500,000 because I forgot to include BetDAC. And when you put the BetDAC figures in, then I easily topped the £500,000. And when I mentioned that on Twitter, there were a few people that were a bit skeptical. But in fact, when you look at what I do and the way that I do it, and how you can do it more importantly, it's actually quite simple to understand. You begin to appreciate exactly what your objective is when you're actively trading. But first of all, let's deal with this £500,000 number. Now, if you can imagine that we're looking at a number of different markets, what is your objective typically when trading? Well, funny enough, I believe that your objective when trading is actually not to worry about the next event that you're trading. You should be looking into the future and looking over a very large period of time and saying, what am I going to achieve over that period of time? Because the problem is, even after 17 years of experience, there are still a number of races that I'll lose on. Why do I lose? I have no idea, because I thought it was going to do one thing and it did another. And the fact is there's a level of entropy in the market that you can't explain. It's just there. It's like the goal that is scored from the defender who tries to clear the ball, smacks his other guy on the back of the head and it ricochets off the bar and post, and then the goalie doesn't know where it is and it goes in off his bum or something. It's like that. There's a certain level of entropy that you can't account for. And it's the same with trading. So if you're focused on the next trade, that tends to lead to an emotional response when it goes wrong, which you then compound on future markets. So the first thing you should do when you're trading is think very long term. Look into the distance and say, okay, over the next 1,000 events that I trade, over the next 10,000, next 100,000 events, and so on and so forth. And then you can execute, despite all of those bumps and ripples that occur. You basically look into the distance and you say, this is what I'm going to do over this period of time. Let me give you a clear example of this. If you work out how many events you're going to trade over the course of a year, that defines clearly your objective and makes it more achievable. If you say that you're going to trade 10,000 events over the year, then if you are aiming to get a £1 profit over 10,000 events, then would you say that that's achievable? Okay, well, you're going to have to learn to get a positive expectancy, and you're going to have to learn to trade and stuff, and you're going to have to mess around a bit at the lower end for a while. But if you have 10,000 events and your objective is a £1 profit, that sounds much more achievable than saying, I want to make 100 or 200 or 500 or something on the next trade. So the first trick that you should use is you look much longer term and you say, what's your objective over the next week, month or year? And doing it over a year gives you plenty of time to oversee those bumps and ripples and seasonality and all of those other issues that you're likely to encounter. So yeah, set a really long-term objective. And if you say, I want to make £1 on average, that makes life a lot easier for you. Maybe you want to make £10 on average. But whatever your objective is, scale it over the long term. Is it realistic to say that you could do 10,000 events in a year? Well, if we take 10,000 and then we divide that by 52, which is the number of weeks in a year, then you end up at around 200 events per week. So if you're going to do 200 a week and we divide that by 7, then that's going to work out just short of about 30 a day. So trading 10,000 events over the course of a year, you're saying, can I find 30 opportunities over the course of a day? And of course, that's perfectly possible. You've got football, cricket, tennis, racing, all manner of things. And what you're saying is, can I earn a certain amount on average over the course of the year by picking 20 or 30 events over the course of the day? So that's the first thing you should look at, is that much broader objective, saying over a very long period of time, over a very large number of events, this is what I'm trying to do. Because then you realize, and I've said this before, if you trade at random, you get random results. But what you're attempting to do here is to trade not quite as random as the rest of the market. And I think that's perfectly possible. When I see, when I post up genuine information and I see negative comments on it, I realise that there are a lot of people that just don't get it. So, I'm actively playing against those people in the market, and therefore, there's my edge. It describes it perfectly. But what about, turning over £1 million? Well, if we looked, for example, yesterday we had a number of race meetings on, and most of them had 8 races on the card. Some of them had 7, some of them had 8. But let's take, for example, if we've got 7 races. No, actually, let's say 8. Let's try and keep these numbers where we want them to be. If we have 8 races within a meeting, and there are 3 meetings in the afternoon, that's 24 races. Now, we actually had more than that yesterday, but let's look at the summer, for example. You get 24 races in the afternoon, 24 in the evening, and perhaps you decide to do an Irish race or something else. All of a sudden, you have 50 attempts to make your profit, to turn over a certain amount of money. So even if you have a relatively small bank, let's say you've got a bank of a couple of thousand, or we could go even lower than that. I'm just trying to use round numbers here. But if you have a bank of a couple of thousand and you commit a trade to the market for £500 and then you trade out for a profit on that, you've put £1,000 through the market. So if we're looking at a card or a day that you've traded 50 events on, then effectively if you trade in and out with £500 on those particular events, then you've traded £50,000 over the course of that day. You've identified 50 markets that you're going to do something in, whether it's manually, automatically, however you want to do it, and that will allow you to actively trade a relatively large number and put a lot of money through the market. Despite the fact you've got a small bank, you're effectively leveraging that bank to enormous proportions, 50,000 in this case, to be able to put that sort of money through the market and give yourself a shot of it. And now any large number multiplied by a very small percentage, which is generally what you get when you're trading, is going to be a large number in itself. Now, of course, you need a positive expectancy, because any small positive number that turns into a much larger one could happen in the other direction. So sort your expectancy out first, but you can see the scale of the opportunity there. So that gets you to 50,000. With a bank of a couple of grand, you could turn over £50,000 over the course of the day. Now, if I just went into the market and did just one trade, there may be markets where that is the right strategy to pursue, but there may be other markets where that's not the right strategy to pursue. And in fact, you get several opportunities within the market. So let us say, for example, how do we get to £500,000? Well, you could actually trade in and out of the market 10 times. So you put money in, money out, that's £1,000. If you do that 10 times, could be over the course of minutes, hours, or however you want to trade, then all of a sudden that 50,000 multiplies by 10 and you're up to £500,000. So how do you get to £1 million? Well, you could increase your stake. Instead of using 500, use 1,000, and then suddenly you reach that magic million in over the course of one day. Or the other option you've got is you just put that money through the market repeatedly. You do more and more. So maybe you put through the £1,000 round trip trade 10 times, or maybe you just use 10 times the amount of money. But of course, a lot of markets won't be able to cope with larger amounts of money. So you should always stake according to your ability to get in and out of the market relatively pain-free. And if you can do that, and you can do it often, then you don't need to use larger amounts of money. So again, even with a small bank, if you put more than one trade through the market, then that effectively leverages your stake to even higher levels. But also think about it, why not trade more than one selection within the market? Because effectively you're leveraging the opportunity there as well. So maybe you only put £500 in and out of each market for a round trip of 1,000, 50 times over the course of the day in 50 markets. But maybe, therefore, you end up going down the route of doing it on more than one runner, and then you're getting leverage that way. And of course, the ultimate thing to do is to do it on more than one runner, more than once, because then you start reaching those enormous totals that you can see. But it's perfectly achievable. If people wonder if I could have possibly put £500,000 through the market, then it would totally freak you out on what happens on a really big day or a really big meeting or a really big race. Because I know after all these years, after 17 years in the market, I know what my edge is, how it occurs, what to do about it, when to execute, and when to really put my foot down. So when those opportunities comes, I really do it. As I've said 1,000 times before, I really like those big meetings. So that's when I tend to put my foot down. In the blog post that I did before, Champions Day, I was saying that they would probably turn over about 2 million. And in fact, they were a bit better than I expected. You know, a lot of them were getting well above 2 million in overall volume. So it was a pretty good market. So you shouldn't be surprised on a good day with good markets that I'm likely to hit much, much higher numbers. But the interesting thing is you can too. If we look at that objective of trading 10,000 markets over the course of the year, that would mean you find sort of about 30 a day, 25 to 30 markets a day. And obviously you'll find more at peak periods and less in quieter periods. But you know, if you can average that over the course of the year, then you're going to turn over enormous amounts of money over the course of the year. But also think about it on an individual event basis. You can raise your stakes, or you could raise the number of times you use that stake, and you can do more than one runner in more than one time. And you know, one of the things that we've done with BetAngel is we've increased your capacity to do that. And on Saturday I was using the latest version of BetAngel, which nudges it up another level again. So, you know, can you achieve 500,000? That's relatively straightforward. If you look at the number of events that you're likely to trade and how you're going to trade it, you can achieve much, much higher numbers. Now, of course, you need to do it safely and you need a positive expectancy. I'm very confident that I can do that. But even if you're not particularly confident, if you trade at random, you're more or less going to break even, less commission. But you can still take a relatively small stake and put enormous amounts of money through the market. I ran a test here the other day where I put a £2 bot on the market, and at the end of the day it traded over £4,000, nearly £5,000 in fact. And that was just using £2 stakes. But I was obviously doing it on 2 runners, and I was repeating that trade through the market on a number of occasions. So yeah, if you want to be a millionaire trader, there are a couple of tricks that you can use. The first is to find many markets. You can put your money through the market once, but obviously if you put the money through the market more than once, your turnover is going to go skyrocketing. And if you do it on more than one selection, then it's going to double at least if you went from 1 runner to 2 runners. Now, it's not perfectly easy to do that, but using the tools within BetAngel, your life is a lot easier and you can do those things. We've built it that way in order to give you those sort of opportunities. So yeah, when you look at the market, somebody asks you what you do for a living, you could say, I trade millions through the market every week, and it's perfectly possible to do so.